as with all good foundation grants, it was of limited duration. Basically, what the Ford Foundation said is, we'll get you started. We'll provide for the support of the students for the first 2 years. After that, the law schools in which these students enroll will have to provide for the 3rd year. And after the Ford grant had run out, the law schools were then expected to provide support for the students, indeed, starting in the 1st year. So the obligations imposed on the legal education community were inevitably increased once this very generous seed money grant from the Ford Foundation played out. The Office of Economic Opportunity, OEO, was to continue, indeed I guess to this day, as a major source of support.
Were there any other conditions to that
Yes.
Ford Foundation grant?
Yeah, there are actually several conditions. One, that students had to be admitted after the summer program to a law school superior to one that they would have been admissible to on their own. In other words, let's say the sponsor of the institute, the host of the institute, couldn't simply admit out of the summer institute students that they would have admitted anyway. The whole focus of the summer institute was to give these students an opportunity that they wouldn't have had otherwise. So that was one very clear stipulation. The other stipulation, which we think came from Ford and or OEO, was that at least half the instructors in these summer institutes must be members of minority groups. Much of this happened before either of us was involved. They had come together to create originally something that was described either as Legal Head Start. It had various different names. The name Council on Legal Education Opportunity apparently was chosen at a meeting in December 1967. They said, we've thought that you and Bob Summers, having done such a superb job co-chairing the Association of American Law Schools Committee on Teaching Law Outside Law Schools, would be the perfect people to direct the CLEO program. After a moment's hesitation, I looked at them and said, putting 2 white guys in charge of a program like this, you got to be nuts. I said, I can't speak for Bob, but I can speak for myself. I would be happy to work for a minority person as the first director of CLEO, but I am not, nor, if I can say so, nor do I think is he. We are of the wrong race and probably the wrong gender. Well, after a very short pause, Dean Keaton said, it just so happens that we do have a minority person who might be suitable.
Morehouse professor Mel Kennedy was that suitable candidate. A history professor, faculty pre-law advisor, and mentor to Martin Luther King, Kennedy was the connective tissue between the students who sought his counsel and the foundation's institutions that would provide the funding. Sandy Rosen was the first associate director of CLEO under Professor Kennedy.
Mel Kennedy was an extremely principled person, and on some levels a moderately frustrated person, having come of an age when black men with a brain had limitations on their capacities to move into the mainstream of professions in the society. And one day he told me the most poignant of things when we were having that conversation, that he in fact did not become a lawyer because one of his smartest classmates had become a lawyer in Chicago and was working as a porter in a men's room or some such thing because he could not get a job or make a living as a lawyer. So he made a choice to use his marvelous brain to become a historian.
Mel was, if you will, was the public face of CLEO. Here was this distinguished Morehouse professor, history professor, pre-law advisor. He had extraordinary presence, if you will. And so he was running the program in terms of he was administratively responsible, budget and that sort of stuff, and he was our public face.
They made a superb choice.
Really?
And he turned out to be, much as he had been Dr. King's mentor, he turned out to be a wonderful mentor to us as well.
Yes.
It was a logical move to make him the executive director of the organization. And, you know, in many ways he was perfect in that role in terms of his ability to work with the white legal power structure and the emerging black legal power structure, and was a man of sufficient wisdom to understand that the program had to reach out to Latinos, to Native Americans, and would focus the program that way.
Professor Rosen predicted problems for CLEO as white students began to challenge race-based admissions criteria in the courts.
I wrote a very brief position paper to the executive committee and board identifying the risk. As a result, the criteria were changed to something like economically disadvantaged students such as. And the program could not possibly be nested here in the federal government, I suppose, if it weren't for that change.
This set up CLEO for the long haul, with more than 6,500 participants since 1968.
I was an inaugural CLEO class member starting law school in 1968.
Sanford Bishop entered the CLEO Institute at Emory that first year and credits CLEO with giving him the confidence to compete successfully in law school. Today, he's Congressman Bishop of Georgia.
A number of the people who entered CLEO with me did not successfully complete the program, but the majority of them were successful, went on to various law schools. Some went to Harvard, some went to Yale, some went to Duke, Vanderbilt, Rutgers, Columbia, and out of that, one of our classmates ended up becoming the dean of the law school at Rutgers. Others became practicing attorneys. Some were government contract lawyers, administrative law judges, municipal court judges, superior court judges. So we've had a lot of success from the group, and of course I was fortunate enough to practice law and ultimately become a member of the state legislature, the state house, state senate, and now a member of Congress.
So how does it feel to know that an alumnus of CLEO is a congressman?
It's very gratifying. I think my favorite statistic is that during the 1973-74 academic year, there were more African American students enrolled in accredited law schools than there were African American attorneys admitted to the bar in all 50 states.
Since its founding in 1968, CLEO has had a profound impact in the legal community.
At the time that Bob and I participated in the founding years of CLEO, there were, outside of the tiny handful of black law schools, there were on the other law faculties of America almost no black professors, almost none.
The issue is treating people like people so they can be what they are going to be they conservative, radical. But that was part of what it was about, to allow people to come up in our society and be whatever they were destined to be, regardless of their race, national origin, gender, or whatever.